Okay, so get started.
Me and Anush will present remediation and disposal of asbestos from contaminated sites, and I will present foreign experience how it is done in other countries, and Anush will present a case study from Australia and do recommendations for Armenia. And the outline for my presentation, I will present background information about asbestos remediation worldwide, and what is remediation and how it is done, and I will concentrate on two countries, US Libya asbestos site and Switzerland experience. Asbestos was used extensively in 20th century, and despite the use of asbestos was reduced dramatically, but it's still used in many countries, and because it is in structures that were constructed in before 1980s. A number of countries, approximately 52, have banned asbestos use. But there are still countries that even produce it, and many industrial countries have remediation programs for affected buildings, and many countries have established good waste management and remediation practices. And remediation is environmental cleanup and remediation are terms that are used interchangeably by a recipient to refer to actions taken to respond to a hazardous material release or a threat of that release that could affect human health and the environment. For example, removal of pollution contaminants from environmental media such as soil, groundwater, sediment, or surface water. And the Superfund mechanism is using for remediation activities, and it is done to remediate abandoned sites or to litigate to force corporations to remediate their contaminated sites. Once a site receives Superfund designation, appropriate organizations start to clean up and force the responsible parties to participate in these cleanup processes. In the USA, for example, remediation standards set by Environmental Protection Agency, EPA. In the European Union, so-called Dutch standards exist, but most of the countries have their own remediation standards. And Canada sets standards by provinces, and there are also guidelines from Canadian Environmental Quality. And here are some responsibilities, example of responsibilities of such organizations. For example, EPA is responsible for removing asbestos waste where immediate actions are needed. They notify owners of the properties and any other responsible parties. And EPA is responsible for ensuring community involvement and public awareness about asbestos and asbestos-related diseases. And EPA should take remedial actions to clean up the sites, complete these cleanups, and remove the site from the national priority list. And they should ensure safe reuse and redevelopment of the site and the long-term protection of human health and the environment. And this is Libya asbestos site where the largest remediation actions taken. This is a small town in northwest Montana. It was the world's largest vermiculite mine there, and in 1963, approximately 80% of the world's vermiculite production was done in Libya. And these products were contaminated with asbestos, especially with amphibole. and it was used in houses, schools, and different buildings. People was exposed to asbestos. In 1999, national attention was to the Libya site because it was observed that lung cancer was incidence of asbestos-related cancers was high, and since that time EPA began investigation and remediation efforts, and it soon became EPA's first priority. It is the largest and the most costly Superfund site in US history. EPA separated this site inoperable units, which will make the management easier, and it was done by their specific characteristics of these areas. So EPA since 1990 did a bunch of activities, which include opening of EPA Information Center in Libya. It was done for raising people's awareness about asbestos, and that people came and ask questions, and so be involved in remediation actions. They investigate known sources of contamination and remove vermiculite from several major source areas. And thousands of investigation studies were done, collect and assessments were done. In 2002, EPA proposed Libya for the national priority list. And then they built a special cell in the Lincoln County landfill for the disposal of asbestos waste. Then they started to test remediating methods of indoor contamination, and many samplings were done, extensive samplings, activity-based outdoor air samplings, sample programs, and so forth. Then the human health and ecological risk assessment, toxicological and epidemiological studies, and direct site-wide risk assessments were done. And since 1999, EPA cleaned up over 2,000 commercial properties and residences. These are main cleanup actions: investigation, excavation, demolition, disposal, and restoration. In Libya, removal activities started from mobilization and site preparation, which include necessary equipment to be mobilized in these sites, using caution tapes. Other hazards in these areas should be isolated and removed. And then removal actions started. Excavation of contaminated soil is the main one, and then off-site disposal of contaminated soil. And they did routinely soil samplings. For these activities, heavy construction equipment were used. It was depending on how much soil should be removed, and always water tanks was used, because in all these activities water was used for protecting from extra dust, and other equipments were used. And then placement of protective covers have been done. Erosion prevention measures, demobilization and the installation of engineered controls. In buildings, the similar activities were done. First, the experts come and investigate and do samplings. Air, indoor dust, and solid samples were taken. And the screenings and inspections were done in homes and different buildings. And for identification of vermiculite insulation from accessible interior and exterior spaces, and then removal actions were needed. So these are removal of asbestos-containing materials. For these activities, vacuum tracks, vacuum boxes were used, and installed negative air system was used for avoiding airborne fibers. Different equipments and materials for cleaning, especially horizontal surfaces, carpets, home items. And the progress is observable. In the past, there was significant and uncontrolled sources of asbestos due to mining and the processing of vermiculite. And asbestos easily was distributed and mixed in the air, and an accessible risk was for health of people. And now it is most significant sources are removed, and it is possible to live and work in Libya without unacceptable risk from asbestos exposure. And for the future, after the remediation action will be done, management plans will be developed to ensure that asbestos is managed effectively to protect the remedy and the citizens from, in Libya. Another country which has successful experience with remediation of asbestos is Switzerland. It is one leading country which have good practice in asbestos management. They have comprehensive laws and guidelines for removal and disposal. And Switzerland banned all types of asbestos in 1990. The steps are similar as in Libya. Started with surveys, site visits, samplings, and then analysis of results and interpretation of results, and then intermediate measures were taken if necessary. Then planning is done. Their definitions of goals, methods, and precautions. They are strictly adhered to guidelines. Then the removal activities are done. Removal, cleaning, disposal, and which is very important for them, check the effectiveness of their work. And they routinely do indoor air measurements, take samplings, inspections, and approve their work. And these are some examples that from Switzerland that only qualified and certified specialists can work in these activities. And for example, another example that if asbestos-containing material cannot be removed, it is labeled for future remediation. And after removal of when asbestos products have been broken or damaged in the room, there should be air measurement before room are used again. And some lessons and recommendations from Swiss experience. It is very important for them professional management of remediation actions. All asbestos types, according to them, should be regulated in comprehensive regulated frame, and import, export, production, and use of all types of asbestos should be banned all over the world. And legal frameworks should exist for reporting and removal of asbestos hazardous materials. And appropriate qualified experts in all activities should be included, and quality assessments should be done very often, and certificates of safe completion should be given. Thank you for your attention.
Question? So it wasn't clear to me why have you selected this Swiss example?
Actually, there is no enough data for other remediation plans. There are guidelines, but no such big remediation actions that were taken place. And
So
Libby, Montana was the largest one, so it was a good example, successful example. And the one country was taken from Europe.
Okay, what was the issue in Switzerland? Why they have selected that community for remediation? Why did they select the community for remediation in Switzerland? What was the issue?
Switzerland, by themselves, they are regulated and have comprehensive laws and regulations.
I understand that. Why this community in Switzerland was selected for remediation?
Because asbestos was used before ban was done, and many buildings and sites contain asbestos.
Okay, let me change the question. Did they do it all over Switzerland?
Yes, there are special companies that provide such services, removal and remediation services, and every person that if he understand that there are asbestos exposure and can call, and experts will come, do investigation, surveys, and all the activities will be taken.
About Libby, Montana. When did the mine start working there?
Actually, from 1880s, there was a very different types of minings were taken place, but the most important was vermiculite mining because it was the most hazardous one.
So vermiculite is a substance that contains asbestos. What is it?
It is used for isolation of buildings. It was widely used there, and
okay, thank you.
thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Present the experience of Australia with tackling asbestos problem. I've chosen Australia as a more relevant country to Armenia in case of because they don't have asbestos mining already, and the biggest issue in Australia is usage of asbestos-containing material. Australia had a big role in asbestos consumption during the time. Australia used to mine different types of asbestos, such as crucibolite, amphibolite, and chrysotile. But in 1983, all types of minings were banned in Australia. But Australia continued to import asbestos, and asbestos including materials from other countries such as Canada, South Africa, United Kingdom, and US. And during 1950s, Australia was the fourth consumer of asbestos in the world. And during the mining years, Australia also used to export the asbestos. But from December of 2003, all types of usage of asbestos banned in Australia. One of the biggest asbestos minings were in Vietnam. It is in Western Australia. Here, it was a blue asbestos mine that crocodilites, and it called Blue Ghost because it caused a lot of health effects and hazards, and a lot of people died from asbestos health effects. Here we see how the workers worked in a mine, and they don't wear any protective clothing, and any safety measurement wasn't done. And also children used to play with asbestos. Vietnam was closed in 1966, and after that Australia did many remediation activities, which I will present later. But in 1966, Vietnam town was shut down, and in 2007 it disappeared from the maps. It doesn't exist as a country, as a town. The other asbestos mining was in New Southwest. Here is the mine, and it's after the closure. Australia also used asbestos cement. James Hardie Industries was the main company that produced asbestos-containing materials such as tiles and sheets of cement asbestos. And employees, we see that they also didn't wear any suits for safe work. And the man in the picture, Mr. Benton, he was employee of James Hardie, and he got asbestosis and mesothelioma during his work, and he was one of the fighters to get compensation for the victims of that James Hardie Industries, and he passed away in 2007, but he did much work in this sphere, and until 2013, 4,000 victims got about 800 million Australian dollars compensation. About 750,000 tons of asbestos was mined in Australia, and 1.5 million tons of asbestos were imported in other countries. During the 60 years, there were 8,200 cases of mesothelioma, and we see that rate of mesothelioma is increasing. It's due to the long latency period of asbestos exposure, and it's still a problem. Mesothelioma cases is very high in Australia. Remediation and to remove asbestos at all is started from the regulations. The first steps were the prohibition of use for all types of asbestosis. First, they ban mining of blue asbestosis, then chrysotile. And the last step was to import any asbestos and asbestos-containing products. Remediation was done in asbestos-contaminated sites in Vietnam and other asbestos mining sites. Also, responsible agencies and organizations developed some guidelines to how to remove asbestos and how to minimize occupational exposure. Also, they developed national code of practice to how to safely remove, not only for workers but also the households. And also the further and continuous management is done in Australia. The management of asbestos contaminated sites started from preliminary site investigation. So the site history investigation is important for example, they used some photos from history to see where asbestos mines were, how they were distributed, how dust could be distributed over the country. And after that, detailed site investigation to see is that materials that they are thinking that they think that it's asbestos, it's really asbestos or not. After the finding the materials, they do sampling of soils, and usually the asbestos cement materials contain 10 to 20% of asbestos. After the sampling they do by hand, by tilling, or by excavation, like Bartoli already mentioned. And after that procedures, they did air quality and dust monitoring, because the dust of asbestos during that work would be distributed in air. And they did analysis to show how to know how the soil is contaminated with asbestos, and how is it relevant to their standards. The risk assessment is very important, because they have to be sure that people living around our workers, they are not at risk during that remediation procedures. Management in situ is the next step. It is done when the asbestos is buried more than 1.5 meters, and they isolate the area with some barriers, like clean fields of soil or geotextile barriers and vegetative barriers. 1 meter soil is considered a standard for, nominally standard for public open spaces, and for other areas is 0.5. And 3 meter clean field is considered to be non-contaminated already. Treatment on site done when asbestos is in various superficial areas of the soil, and asbestos buried no more than 1 meter. It's done during hand picking, tilling, screening, excavation, and etc. And then they put it in some bags, and they bury it on site, or remove it off site and bury it in some landfills that are especially for asbestos burning. For minimizing the occupational exposure, the specific agencies such as National Occupational Health and Safety Communication, they developed some guidelines how to safely remove the asbestos materials, what kind of suit they need, and what should be the specific working condition at that time. And in Australia, they have a lot of specific companies that are specialized specifically to remove asbestos materials, and they are available, very available on internet, and they even had a specific website that provides all information about that companies. which is unfortunately is not available in our country. Educational activities was had done, and they are being done nowadays, and there are lots of agencies, organizations in Australia that are working with environmental issues and things like that, and they provide different leaflets, brochures, and they also make ads on TV, on internet to show how asbestos is hazardous, its health effects, and how to safely remove. And because in Australia, in our country, is also the people used to reconstruct their own homes, their cells, and it's very important to provide them information how to do it safely if they are not going to ask for help at specific organizations and companies. Diagnosis of asbestos related health effects is also important. People who are working in asbestos removing companies or exposed to asbestos, once they are exposed, they should have annual chest X-ray, and we see that if mesothelioma is detected in early stages, it could be recovered by surgery. And we see how it declined sharply when time is passing. And situation in Armenia. It was very difficult to find any information. I mean the confidential the information that is provided by government or by some agencies. There are some information, but they are not that reliable. And I found out that asbestos is considered as a hazardous waste according to Ministry of Nature Protection of Republic of Armenia, and the secondary use of asbestos is prohibited. It should be thrown away, and there are some guidelines that show that how asbestos removal should be done, and and also they mentioned that there are specific sites that asbestos should be buried, and I assume that there is such places, because that guidelines was developed by Millennium Challenge Account and was ratified by government of the Republic of Armenia. People in Armenia are aware of asbestos, that which material contains asbestos or not, but they are not well aware about the health effects, its hazardous effects that asbestos has. And there is no specific data about asbestos-related diseases. A few years ago, the Deputy Minister of Ministry of Health he said that in his interview that about 40 years there is no incidence of asbestosis in Armenia. But I don't know if it's reliable information or not. Yeah, and I didn't find by internet, also by telephone call, informational agencies that provide information about addresses or telephone. They didn't provide any information about companies that are doing asbestos removal. And water pipes were replaced by new polyethylene pipes, but there is no reliable data that asbestos is contaminated the water and it could be ingested and be harmful for health. In Australia also the water pipe was replaced, but it's not in that remediation frame, but they did because the pipes were very old and they have water loss by that pipes. That was the reason. And here we can surely say that it was asbestos remediation that we replaced our pipes. It's maybe just for safety and for economical issues. I had some recommendations for Armenia, but they are not that constructive that my friends suggest. I suggest to improve the weak sides, and the main role has a public will that people will show that they want to do something and to raise some problems. Much effort, of course, should be done by government and political authorities, and there are few agencies and organizations responsible for environmental issues, but I think we had a lack of such environmental organizations, and we need to develop that sphere also. And also, we should struggle for better environment and better life. Thank you.
Could you please go to the diagnosis slide, whether it's Australian regulation or standard?
It's an Australian regulation. It's down for. Also, they had some regulations for their workers. They before hiring, they passed through some medical examinations, and then if they had little suspicion of exposure, they have to go to annual chest X-ray, and if it's somehow positive, they also have some other analysis that I hear.
How they measure, like once exposed? What does this mean? So,
it means that once.
it seems that everyone should get annual chest X-ray because it's so common.
Even if they wear protective gear, they still are considered as exposed, or what?
No, if there is some problems with their suit, or the conditions make some dangerous situations that they were exposed, in that cases they should have.
You mentioned about public will. What do you need to create public will, first of all? When do you have public?
Educated population.
Educated about what?
Educated about the problems that also that issues that affect their lives, their health, everything that's educated overall, but some people who are responsible for some issues, for example, environmental, they should address that problem and make them, that people to be aware of that problem. And I hope during the time we will have that situation.
So until now in Australia, they have TV programs on how to handle asbestos materials.
Not programs, but short movies, or yes, they show and they encourage people to not do that removal procedures themselves, and to ask that companies to come and do this work. And also they said that houses built or buildings built before 1982, they considered as asbestos containing, built with asbestos containing material, so they also gave them information and some hints how to know whether their houses contain asbestos or not.
Other questions, comments?
Did you mention that you were not able to access the asbestos removal companies, or you were not able to find them?
I tried to find, I do the Google search, but I didn't find, and I did it several times. To try
There's
to in
Elo Pages.
Armenia, and it's just, I didn't find.
There's a directory called Elo Pages where they have all the list. Especially in Spitak and Ghibli, there are more removal sites than in Lehman. And I found a couple of sites there.
Just a comment. You mentioned about the Deputy Minister of Health. One of the Deputy Ministers was here for the environmental symposium with Ramazini. And he mentioned that in the last 5 or 10 years, I don't remember, we didn't have any professional diseases. So this was good that we didn't have asbestos-related issues for the last 40 years. So it's good to know. And it describes the situation actually. How would you interpret this comment?
No data.
No
data.
No one knows anything and no one does anything. Okay, thank you. So lots of good work. Now you know a lot about